Thank you, God, for Kathy Zavada. I used to get to hang with Kathy all the time up in Seattle because you had a brother who, does he still live up there? Yep. All right. All right. So, yeah. And then I moved to Clarkston, Washington. I thought I'd never see her again. And lo and behold, she had a concert that somebody had won, or a contest going that somebody won a house concert. You know, gift was the house concert for some funding. And it was a person out in Pullman, Washington. And she'd never been there before in her life, so she came out and played, and the person decided instead of a house concert to just do it at the local UCC church. So a couple of years, year and a half ago, you were out there, and I brought up about half my congregation, and we all sat around and chanted and loved it. So thank you. It's good to see you again. And then I remember when I moved here, it was one of the blessings that she lives just up the road. I ran into her in the, Berryvale store and said, you got to come down and play sometime soon. So and I understand it had been a while since she had been here, so it was a good timing. So thank you. Thank you, Chris, for putting that together, Johnson. So good morning. Good morning. So we are talking about so many T words, right? So many T words. Trouble. Right here in River City. Starts with T, that rhymes with P, that stands for pool, right here in River City. Some musical, I can't. Music Man, thank you, yes. Well, we're going to talk about the Thanksgiving and tithing word. I love that introduction, because tithing is a thanks. And so, how many of you have had the tithing word used to kind of browbeat you a bit? Or a lot? Yeah. Good, so you're all ready. I'm going to browbeat you some more. No, I'm not. As you know, I'm good for debunking myths. You know, the whole Jesus was poor myth. Remember we kind of debunked that a few weeks ago and other stuff. And so taking a look at stuff that we've kind of held as this is how it is and kind of dissolving that. Can we do that with tithing? Can we turn it into something that maybe is a little more fun? All right. Some people are sitting there going, tithing and fun in the same sentence. Okay, got to see this act. So what is tithing? Tithing is, in case you don't know, 10%. It just means 10% of something, anything. That's all it is. It's just a word. Don't fear the word. Breathe. Breathe in the word. Breathe out the word. Don't hold on to the word. And it was used in ancient times. It was used in the ancient Middle East a lot as a tax. It was a tax to the rulers. It was a tax to the government. The Israelites operated as a theocracy, which basically said God's the king. And the Levites are the administrators, therefore the bureaucrats of the kingdom. And so in a theocracy, everything you do is about God. So your taxes are paid to God. You know, not Obama or Bush or the IRS, God. I'm not going for politics, just whatever your opinions are, they're just fine. But they're not paid to any particular person, they're paid to God. So everything in the Bible is always for God because God rules the whole country. And in that case, it was more of a finite, big guy in the sky watching down over us, manipulating things around kind of God. Now, there is a whole metaphysical way to read that, as Diana is wonderfully teaching in Bible classes. By the way, I'm so sorry, I forgot to also mention that Mary's class on Tuesday during the daytime is also on, even though the office is closed. So if you're in that class, she's doing it. So, slight commercial aside. So tithing is done that way. Tithing was the theocracy. Tithing was a way of supporting the priestly class and the widows and the orphans and the infirm. Okay, those who needed it. It was a way of basically of maintaining the whole community. Kind of the way that we do taxes today. It's ideally to support the whole community. Sometimes they're misused these days, but and they were misused back then too. There's a bunch of admonitions about the misuse of tithes. So is it Bible mandated today? The Bible used a lot of mandates, a lot of rules, a lot of you must do this, because the people they were dealing with were spiritually and emotionally immature, and it was a way of guiding people into healthy practices. Stuff like thou shalt not steal apparently was a new concept for them. And so they needed a rule about it. You know, if you read the Old Testament, any god that came along, they were willing to worship that god until finally God said, look, me and nobody else. Get your mind focused, get your eye focused. Quit bouncing around from one to the other. We still have people like that today, don't we? You bounce around from one spiritual path to another. I'll try this path, and then that one challenged me, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on to this spiritual path. Oh my God, that one just got a little bit difficult. Let's move on to this spiritual path. And so we still have that going on today. And the idea is to get more mature and to get focused and to stay focused. So tithing was just simply one of those processes. It was one of those ways of saying, you have to do this to help support the whole community, to keep it going. Okay, so take a breath. So tithing is not a spiritual principle. Aren't you glad? You ever heard that before? Tithing is not a spiritual principle. Tithing is a practice. The spiritual principle is the law of giving and receiving, giving and receiving, giving and receiving that we have talked about. Tithing is a practice, a way to embody that. But the law, when, in that wonderful quote from Eric Butterworth, Jesus was very clear about the law, very specific about the law of giving, but he wasn't specific about any practice of the law. Okay? So it's not some Bible-mandated, God said you must, or else, whatever. It's just a practice. So, right now, the board members and Reverend Mary are sitting there kind of going, it's like, you just talked about a tithing. What are you going to do now? So the question is, why give? Can I pick on you? Is it okay to pick on you? Okay. Why give? Why do tithing? If we're going to invoke the principle of giving and receiving, it's good to have some discipline about that process. If I go to the gym, I've noticed that some of you read on my Facebook page, or I think maybe I shared it up here, that I went to the gym. I started going to the gym. Isn't that wonderful? Do you know how many times I've been? That's called not a consistent practice, right? Okay? Not yet. If we want to invoke the law of giving and receiving, just like anything else in life, a consistent invoking of the practice is a really good, healthy thing. And so Butterworth refers to it as the training wheels of our consciousness, the training wheels of getting involved with giving and receiving. And some of us need training wheels. That's why I'm looking to see my potential trainer. I have a gentleman who said he would be my trainer, but I needed to get some cardio, and a little base built first before he wanted to come in and work with me. And I used to have a trainer up in Seattle, and because I paid a massive amount of money to the guy, and because he was my favorite sadist, as I used to call him, I would show up to get beaten on consistently on the times that I set the appointments. But without that discipline, without that process, I tend to just, I don't really feel like it today. Bed feels so warm. Oh, that spinning class, the music's so loud, and it's a lot of work, and I don't want to go. So I tend not to. So tithing is a practice that is enough to get your attention. 10% will get your attention in your money, won't it? For many of us, it will. Did I hear you? I heard a couple of quiet yeses. Okay, yeah. So 10% will get our attention. If you're one of those fortunate people, then you can try 20%. Maybe that'll get your attention. But anyway, 10% is enough to kind of stretch us to kind of go, because what we're doing with the practice of tithing is this. We are building spiritual muscle. We are building a faith in a law, in spiritual law. We're building faith in the idea that if I give into the universe, I will receive from the universe, and this dance and this flow, this in-breath and the out-breath of the universe will actually sustain and support me, and I can trust it. And isn't that why we're here? It's to learn that, can I trust spiritual principle? Can I trust that infinite presence, whatever name I give it? Can I trust that here in my life on planet Earth? Can I trust it in my job? Can I trust it in my finances? Can I trust it in my health? Can I trust it in my relationships? Can I trust it? And the only way to find out is to step out and try. Because if we don't step out and try, we'll never know. So tithing is a practice that gets our attention in most cases, especially if we've never done it before. It gets our attention. It calls to us. And so We have the choice of answering the call or saying, not yet. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But it'll get our attention. Our intellect, which is not in spiritual beliefs, thinks that we can't do this. We look at our budget, oh, I can't do 10%. No way. Okay? And our soul says, trust. Our spirit says, trust. Try it. How many of you ever had something that your intellect told you knew you couldn't do, but you tried it anyways? A few of you? Yeah. Francis, how is parachuting out of an airplane? Yeah, at 65 years old. Okay? And so we try it anyways. And we find, guess what? Not only do we live, we usually have fun doing it, and sometimes we even thrive. We get to bring up the parachute jump, all this over and over again, for that. And it's a fun memory. So the practice builds belief in God as our source. So I want to clear up a couple of misconceptions about tithing. Number one, God will love you more if you tithe. Some of you may have heard that, hopefully not in this church, but in churches that you've been in before. God will love you more if you tithe. The truth is, God can't love you anymore. God is infinite love already, and you're immersed in it, and nothing you do or don't do will ever change that. Breathe that in. Breathe that in. You are immersed in a field of infinite love right here, right now. There is nothing you can do or not do. Even if it gives you feedback and echo. There's nothing you can do that will change that. So whether you tithe or whether you don't tithe, God loves you anyways. God's love is not performance-based. Isn't that great? God's love is not based on our performance. If it was, I'd be in a whole lot of trouble. And I know some of you would be too. Secondly, your life won't magically become a bed of roses. Tithing is not a magic pill. Just because you start to tithe doesn't mean that all of a sudden everything goes, and all your problems clear up, your acne clears up, your relationships are wonderful, etc., etc. It isn't a magic pill. We were in the men's retreat yesterday, and we were working with that idea of opening our hearts. And one of the things that Doug Von Koss told us was, if we open our hearts, it doesn't mean that everything suddenly becomes perfect. But what it does mean is we're in a better shape to deal with life as it is. And when we're invoking the law of giving and receiving, when we're playing in that, when we're active in that, when we're out on the dance floor doing that dance with giving and receiving, we're better able to use it. We're better able to apply it. We're better able to deal with it. I use the metaphor of training wheels on a bicycle. Okay, a bicycle works best when it's moving forward at some speed, right? You ever try and balance a bicycle when it's stationary? Okay, a few people can. I learned it's called a track stand, by the way. A few bicycles can, but it's really hard for most people. And even then, you've got to be really sharp. And even then, you're not completely still. You're moving it back and forth just a tiny bit. But it's really hard to balance a bicycle or a motorcycle or any two-wheeled vehicle at a complete standstill. It balances much better when it's moving. Balances much better when it's moving. And guess what? So does your life. So does your life. So the question is, do you want to play with this process? So it's not an automatic magic pill, but it will support you in the process of being in the dance of giving and receiving, consciously being in the dance of giving and receiving. And so then you get to start to be more in balance and you get to start to deal with life more easily. The third misconception that we sometimes have, the third myth, and I've heard this taught in New Thought churches, I'm sad to say, is that if you don't tithe, the universe will take it from you somehow. The universe will get you. Yeah, thank God that's not true. It's not true. There's no law, universe, God out there that punishes. Amen. Okay? That's the good news we have here. That kind of differentiates us from some of the churches around this country, this community. There's no God that's going to punish you. Again, you're immersed in infinite love. It doesn't care how you perform. It loves Adolf Hitler and Mother Teresa exactly the same way. However, what we teach is all is love and all is law, and the law says there are consequences. So if I don't play in the law of giving and receiving, I'm going to experience congestion in my life. I'm going to experience nothing happening in my life. See, if I don't flip on the lights and turn on the electricity in here, am I going to experience light? No. Thank you. You all get the idea of light switches and electricity and... Okay, we're good? So no, I won't. But not because the lights are punishing me, not because the lights don't like me, just that's how the flow of electricity works. You got to turn it on. You got to open, flip the switch to let it flow through to continue on down the stream. Right? It's the same thing with giving, receiving, giving, receiving. If we're not giving, if we're not reaching out, I used the metaphor a couple weeks ago of walking across the dance floor. And if you don't walk across the dance floor and ask somebody to dance, you're never going to get a dance, probably. And nothing will happen. So are we willing to stretch? Are we willing to reach out? Are we willing to do something to start to invoke that process? So I have a story to tell you about tithing. It's my story. I've always loved tithing. And if you believe that, I've got some swampland to sell you in Florida. And a beautiful bridge to sell you over here in the Sacramento River that I own. My first year of practitioner studies, I was in Seattle, and Reverend Kathy Ann up there requires tithing from the practitioners. And the class at the time, you could go to about week 23 or 24 without tithing, but by that week you were supposed to be in full tithing. Now, as I told the first service, there's two rules that got changed in prac training in Seattle after I went through the class. One, I will not talk about ever from the pulpit. And the second one was that they started people tithing from day one of practitioner studies after I went kicking and screaming through about tithing. Okay? Because I had read Eric Butterworth, and Eric Butterworth says, you can't require people to tithe. You can't force them to tithe. That's against spiritual principle, and most churches do it out of fear or out of neediness. And so, it's nice to see you back, Jim. Sorry, Jim Quible's back there for the first time after having a... Yes. Jim holds up the time signs for me. And so he does that. He just did 10 minutes for me like that. I went to visit him in the hospital when he was there. Some of you may or may not know he had a minor stroke and pneumonia and ended up in the hospital. And when I went to visit him, I grabbed the 10-minute sign and walked it into his room and flashed it at him. This is how many days you have before you have to be healed. And it's done pretty good. So thank you. I got stuck in the self-righteousness around tithing. Unfortunately, if you've ever met Reverend Kathy Ann, she's sort of an immovable object when it comes to principle, when it comes to stuff like that. So there wasn't any question that this was not going to happen. The question was whether I was going to be a practitioner or not. And so I was invited after that first year of prac to take a little time off to think about it. And to see if I wanted to come into alignment with what it took to truly be a practitioner in that church. And so I breathed and I prayed and I meditated and I journaled and I fussed and said a few things too and shook my fist at the sky once in a while. But what I finally came to was I have a calling. And I knew that calling was clear. And that calling was to be a practitioner. I was very clear on the call. I was also very clear that I was in the right church. I for a while thought about moving down to Santa Rosa and getting into Edwards Church because I knew I could skate through there. My daughters live in Petaluma. It was a nice logical process. And for some reason I couldn't find a job. I couldn't find any housing. And I finally realized and gave up and said, you know what, I'm in the right church, dealing with the right stuff, and I need to deal with it. And so I finally did. And when I finally got it that yes, it's my call, and yes, this is the place to do it, I finally said, Spirit, make it easy. whether I agree with it or not, whether I like it or not. It is what's required here. Make it easy. And you know what? It became easy. Stuff shifted in my life right away. I suddenly had more money in my life. And it became easy. What I find is when we have a purpose, when we have a calling, when we have something that's bigger than the practice. See, Kathy Zavada could sit in her home and just play all the time, whatever she wanted to. But she has a bigger calling, which is to share that music with us, to inspire us spiritually, to lift our consciousness. Am I correct? Yes. That was a nod. I could write all these magnificent talks and sit in my bed Sunday mornings and watch football and look at the talk. But I have a mission, I have a calling, and that is to lift and inspire each of you, and to lift and inspire this community, and to try and help create a more conscious, more awake world. Okay? You have a calling. You may not even know what it is. You may have put it on the back burner for a while, but you have a calling. You have something in your life that's firing you up and that wants to express through you. What I find is that when we have a purpose that's bigger than ourselves, we will do what it needs to be done. And sometimes it can be just a fun, small purpose. Somebody just shared with me they've got a retreat in San Diego coming up in a little bit, and they want to be able to go on the beach and look good in a bikini. And so they're doing exercise and diet to help with their body. It might be a wedding that you want to show up for and be a bridesmaid or the bride and look good in the dress. Okay. Find something you have a calling for. And tithing is a process of opening up the giving, receiving, the flow of the universe. And it will flow wherever it is that you need it to flow, wherever it is that you want it to flow. And so it's training wheels which most of us need to get our attention and to keep us focused. So it's not about right or wrong, good or bad. God's going to love you more or less. I'm not going to love you any more or less. I'm not sure about our treasurer. Where's our treasurer? Yes. Will you love them more or less if they tithe?
Sure.
Okay. So she might. But you don't have to worry about God and your immortal soul. It's all good. Last week I talked about our kind of pledge talk and how much money it takes here to run the center, and that it takes about $112 a person per month to keep us in a healthy flow of affairs. And I had a person on the way out who kind of looked at me and said the thing that I feared the most. She said, "Oh, I can lower my giving." And then she laughed, and she said, "I'm joking." And I knew she was. I could tell by the way she said it right at the start. And she said, "I could, but I wouldn't, because I know the value of giving. I have the experience of giving, and I know what it feels like, and I know the results, and I know it feels good." We can have our training wheels, we can get past our training wheels to where we're no longer looking at 10%, we're looking at 11%, 12%, whatever it is, to support our spiritual home. Okay? So we start to give not because we need training wheels anymore, but because we have a joy of giving. But you know where you are in your life. Do you need training wheels? And there are certain things, we all need training wheels in certain things. And we all hate to admit it. If I wanted to play piano, it would not sound pretty right now. I cannot sit down and do what she does at the piano. I'd probably have to start off by finding where middle C is on the piano, and then learning how to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Now, most of us in our adult lives don't like to learn how to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star with new things in our lives, right? Or the equivalent thereof. So we don't start a whole lot new. We don't try and risk a whole lot new because we might look stupid, foolish, ignorant, incompetent. As a friend of mine said, anything worth doing is worth doing badly until you learn how to do it well. But most of us don't want to go through the badly stage. So tithing is just simply that. It's just simply, if I need the discipline, if I need something to direct me, to keep me focused, to keep me consistent in the engagement of the law of giving and receiving, it's a wonderful, beautiful, powerful process for that. So What about I can't give 10%? I'm going to give you homework for this week. Ready for homework? Yes. All right. Number 1, just become aware of your thoughts of tithing and of giving and receiving. Your thoughts and your feelings. Just notice them. Don't judge them. You don't have to change them. Just notice them. The first service, I had a person, the minute I started tithing, got up and walked out of here. I'd say he probably has some resistance to the idea of tithing. It's just a guess. Could have been that he wanted to watch the pregame show for the 49ers, I don't know. Just notice your feelings, just pay attention. Secondly, if you're willing to, play with that law. Engage with the idea of consistent giving and receiving. If you can't do 10%, pick a number, pick a percentage. I'll do 1%, I'll do 2%, I'll do 5% of my income. But pick something that will get you to consistently go to the gym of giving. Consistently engage you in that process. Because if you want consistent receiving from the universe, guess what you need to do? Consistent giving. I use the metaphor of it's like we stand back there at that light switch, turning it on and off, on and off, on and off, and wonder why the lights go on and off in our lives. And the lights, again, aren't trying to teach us a lesson. They're just responding to what we put out. So are we being consistent? The other thing, if you can't do, if with picking a number, if you would say, I'd like to engage that 10% somewhere, I can't do it on my whole income, how about this? I'll do it on the unexpected income I receive. Most of us have an idea of what our expected income is, right? This is yes. Okay, good. Most of us have an idea of what our regular expected income is, our job, salary, our retirement benefits, our whatever it is. We have an idea of what that is. Anything you get over that, tithe 10% of it. It's not in your budget anyways. And you get to keep how much of that? 90% of that. That's a good thing. In the Prosperity Plus, the first year program, Mary Morrissey talks about, sorry, both wonderful Marys. But Mary Morrissey talks about a friend of hers who had made that agreement to tithe 10% of her unexpected income, and suddenly came up with a $30,000 check from an insurance payout that she had totally not expected ever. And she's sitting there, as she said, at first she was yay for the check, and then all of a sudden she realized, oh no. I'm going to have to write a check for $3,000 as a tithe. And she said it was hard for her. And she said she went to Mary and started talking about that, and she came out very clear that she was going to write that check. She got to keep the 90% of it, the $27,000. Play with your unexpected income. Just see if you can practice with that. Anybody willing to play with that? Great. Finally, start to listen to what am I being called to? What is the call? Where is it that the law of giving and receiving really wants to show up in my life and I'm really willing to engage it? What is it that's bigger than me that I'm saying yes to? Maybe I've been afraid to say yes to it. Maybe I have no idea how to do it, but am I willing to just say yes to it? Am I willing to walk across that dance floor and ask Spirit to dance? Listen to that call. And then release the fear and the congestion around it and open up to the flow of the universe. And again, tithing is the practice and the process of opening up to that. Are you willing to do those three things? Yes. Pay attention, engage it at some level, whatever level you can do it, and listen for what's the bigger picture, the bigger call that's going on in your life, and you say, you know what, I am willing to answer that call and say yes. That's your homework for the week. I'm going to close with a quote from Catherine Ponder, then we're going to do a prayer, and we're going to have Kathy playing lovely music while I pray. Such a privilege. The quote from Catherine Ponder from the Dynamic Laws of Prosperity. If this has a little deja vu ring to it, it's the exact same quote I used last week. I love this quote. True prosperity has a spiritual basis. God is the source of your supply. Your mind, body, abilities, talents, education, job, or profession are all instruments and channels of your prosperity, but God is the source. Therefore, you must do something definite and consistent to keep in touch with that rich source if you want to be consistently prospered. Sharing is the beginning of financial increase. Systematic giving opens the way to systematic receiving. So I invite you this week to open up to systematic receiving and practice systematic giving. Let's pray. Take a deep breath together. Letting go of anything that's in the way, I open to Spirit. I open to an infinite source of good, an infinite source of love, an infinite source of the life, energy that is within and as and through us all. That source is inexhaustible. That source never turns off. That source is constantly giving, expressing, moving. That source is all there is. And because that presence is infinite, because that source is infinite, we ourselves are one of it. We are one of that right here, right now. We are one of that life energy. We are one of that love. We are one of that prosperity. There is nothing we could ever do to stop being that. That is our nature. We are that infinite presence, individualized and expressing itself as the person sitting in your chair. We are that. And so from that awareness, I speak my word that we truly open to the power and the grace and the glory of who we truly are. We are that infinite in form. We are greater than all the stuff. The ideas of lack and limitation are just shadows in our minds and are not the truth of Spirit. And so we shine that light of the infinite into every single corner of our lives, even the darkest corners of our lives. We shine the light of the infinite. We shine that light of consciousness. We shine that light of the one presence that is expressing in, through, and as each of us right here, right now. And we allow that to enliven our lives, to enliven and enrichen our lives, to bless everything we touch, everything we are. We open to that flow, knowing that it is coming through at a rate and at a magnificence greater than we can even imagine. And all we have to do is simply say in our heart of hearts and our deepest part of our being, yes. I invite you to say that with me, yes. Yes to that flow of good. Yes to that infinite love. Yes to the highest and greatest idea of who I have come here to be. Who it is and what it is that wants to express through me. We say yes to that. And out of that yes comes so much good in our lives beyond our imaginations. Because that is the nature of the infinite. It flows and brings with it more joy than we can ever experience. It says in the Bible that God's good comes with no sorrow added. And so we open up to that. We move from glory to greater glory. That is our life. That is our nature. And so in gratitude for this truth, in gratitude knowing that this principle, this process is in operation in our lives, and all we have to do is open to it and consistently keep the gates open, consistently keep the doors open. And so we find a way, a process, a pattern, a practice that allows us to consistently say yes and engage this source. And for all the good that comes out of that, I am so grateful. For the Spirit that moves in, through, and as that good, and in, through, and as each of us, I am so grateful. And so we allow this process to be planted into the law, into the soil of consciousness, into the soil of that creative energy of Spirit that we don't have to figure out how to do it, that we are just willing. That yes is responded to by a yes in the universe that is so much greater and so much bigger than we have ever known before. And so we let that be. We let that be so in our lives. We simply ground it in and allow it to be by saying, and so it is. Thank you.